They called it processing, not war. Admiral Threxil watched Earth rotate beneath the forward viewport, blue and white and insignificant. A catalogue entry. A resource node with an inconvenient population. His bridge staff spoke in measured tones, translating sensor returns into columns of certainty. No alarms, no urgency. The invasion schedule glowed clean and confident across the tactical display. Humanity, according to Council archives, had discovered faster-than-light travel late and poorly. Their ships burned chemical fuels far too long. Their hulls were thick, inelegant slabs of metal instead of coherent energy lattices. They favored projectile weapons, an embarrassing relic preference, noted in 3 separate intelligence briefs. Threxil had skimmed those sections once, then approved the standard suppression package. "Processing window confirmed," an aide reported. "Projected resistance duration, 6 hours. Civil compliance within 1 planetary rotation." Threxil inclined, his head. Generous estimates, but acceptable. The Council valued restraint, at least in language. In practice, Earth was a solved problem. 10,000 vessels formed a layered shell around the system, elegant arcs of light and geometry. 67 human warships were visible, scattered and improperly aligned, clinging close to their planet like debris caught in gravity. 67. The number sat in the corner of the display, unchanged. No reinforcements. No hidden mass signatures. Just relics awaiting inventory. "Begin Phase 1, Threxil said. Energy capacitors across the fleet charged in sequence. This was ritual more than necessity, an opening demonstration meant to break morale. Targeting solutions painted the human formation in compliant colors. Yield settings were dialed to containment thresholds, not annihilation. The Council preferred intact infrastructure. Planets processed faster when their cities were still standing. A junior officer hesitated. "Admiral, human transmissions continue. They are issuing terms." Threxil allowed himself a thin smile. Terms. The word carried weight only when backed by leverage. "Log them," he said. "Proceed." The first salvo left the fleet in a synchronized pulse, tens of thousands of energy lances crossing vacuum in disciplined silence. Timers counted down impact in seconds. Threxil watched the trajectories with detached interest, already shifting his attention to post-engagement logistics. Evacuation corridors would be designated after resistance collapsed. Labor allocations, calculated. Compliance governors installed. On the display, the countdown reached 0. For a fraction of a second, the human ships were lost in glare. Threxil waited for the damage reports to populate. They always did. Shields failing, hulls venting, casualty curves spiking sharply upward. That was the rhythm of every compliant world. Nothing appeared. The glare faded. 67 human ships remained. Their formations were unchanged. No debris fields bloomed. No heat plumes bled away into darkness. Silence stretched across the bridge. "Confirm hits," Threxil said, his voice level. "Confirmed," the aide replied. Slower now. All weapons functioned within parameters. Energy output at 100%. Target contact intact. A second later, a new data line flickered into existence. Absorption ratios, loss calculations, numbers that did not align with precedent. Threxil leaned forward for the first time. "Run it again," he said, "because sometimes even relics surprised you. Once." The display reset. Timers began counting down anew. The humans spoke before the second salvo was authorized. The transmission cut cleanly through council channels, unencrypted and steady. No music, no insignia. A single voice, human standard cadence, translated in real time across the bridge. It did not plead. It did not threaten. "This is a notice of terms," Admiral Threxil did not interrupt. He gestured for the channel to remain open, curiosity sharpening his focus. Around him, officers exchanged faint looks. Species that begged usually did so with noise. Species that resisted did not speak at all, the voice continued. "We request an immediate ceasefire. Establish evacuation corridors at these coordinates." A grid appeared, overlaid on the system map. 12 arcs. extending from Earth's orbital plane, timed and spaced with precise intervals. Window duration, 90 minutes. Civilian traffic only. No weapons, no pursuit. Threxil felt a ripple of irritation. Requests implied parity. You are advised, the human said, that interference with evacuation will be considered a hostile act. A pause followed, intentional, controlled. Then, we are prepared to enforce this. Threxil exhaled slowly. Log the transmission, he said. Flag as psychological deflection. The Council had encountered this before. Primitive species often attempted moral framing once defeat became inevitable. Appeals to mercy, to shared values, to the inconvenience of extermination. There were entire libraries devoted to such behaviors, categorized and cross-referenced by compliance outcomes. A senior legalist spoke up. Admiral, Council precedent is clear. Evacuation corridors are granted post-suppression, not before. Correct, Threxil replied. Authority is established first. On screen, the human voice resumed, as if aware of the debate. You have 180 seconds to acknowledge. After that, we will assume refusal. A countdown appeared, stark and unsentimental. 180. 179. The bridge stirred. Not with fear, but with annoyance. Timers imposed by the inferior were an affront to hierarchy. Response? An aide asked. Threxil straightened. Transmit Council position. The return message carried the full weight of interstellar law. Earth was designated a non-compliant world under Council jurisdiction. Military action was authorized to restore order. Evacuation would be considered after resistance ceased. This was not cruelty. This was efficiency. Billions had been processed. This way. Systems ran smoother when rules were not negotiated mid-operation. The human channel remained open. Council authority noted, the voice said, no change in tone. Evacuation offer stands. Timer continues. Punchline clarity cut the room. We are not asking permission. Threxil's mandibles tightened. End this, he said. Authorize second salvo. Full yield. Energy banks began charging again, readings climbing past the previous firing. This time, there would be no restraint. If the humans wished to anchor themselves to their planet, so be it. The Council did not pause invasions for theatrics. A junior officer cleared their throat. Admiral, civilian traffic has begun moving. Along the proposed corridors. Threxil glanced at the display. It was true. Small, dense clusters lifting from atmosphere, threading the arcs the humans had marked. Millions of heat signatures accelerating away from Earth. They expect us to comply, the officer said quietly. Threxil watched the timer reach 0. Refusal acknowledged, the human voice said. Evacuation continues. Another standalone. Line followed, calm as a verdict. You were warned. Threxil raised a claw. The order to fire hung there, absolute and unquestioned. In that moment, Earth was still a problem to be solved. The solution was about to change. The second salvo was calibrated to end discussion. Across the fleet, energy output climbed to suppression maxima. Capacitors bled light. Coherent beams aligned with surgical precision. No longer demonstrations, but executions. The Council had refined this art across 1,000 compliant worlds. Overwhelm shields, shear hulls, collapse resistance before morale could adapt. Fire, Threxil ordered. The void ignited. Energy lances crossed the distance in tight lattices, impacts synchronized within microseconds. On the tactical display, predicted outcomes rendered instantly. Shield failure at 0.4 seconds, hull breach at 0.7, total loss by 1.2. Casualty curves bloomed red in anticipation, then the numbers hesitated, impact registered, energy transfer confirmed. But instead of collapse, the human ships flared, brief, contained halos of light crawling across thick armor plates and layered fields. Heat bled outward and vanished. Shock waves rippled, then flattened. Damage reports populated the screen. They were wrong. Report, Threxil said. A sensor officer swallowed. Human forward shields absorbed primary impact. Residual energy dispersed across hull mass. Structural. Loss. 1.3% average. The bridge stilled. Repeat, Threxil said. Confirmed, the officer replied. Absorption efficiency measured at 98.7%. Secondary systems rerouting excess heat into radiators and... They paused. Into mass sinks. Mass sinks. Crude. Effective. Another line appeared, colder than the rest. Crew casualties. 0. A standalone line burned itself into the moment. 0 penetration. Threxil's mandibles flexed. They should be venting, he said. No lattice can. Hold that yield. They aren't using lattices, a science aide said quietly. They're using armor, layered, dense. Excessively so. The third salvo followed without orders, automated doctrine kicking in. If one strike failed, repeat with variation. Frequencies shifted. Phase modulation adjusted. Output spiked another 12%. Again, the human fleet held. This time, the displays showed something new. The absorbed energy did not simply vanish. It flowed, channeled along internal routes, bled into structural elements, redistributed with mechanical indifference. The ships looked less like delicate systems and more like moving fortresses. Heat saturation, Threxil demanded. Rising, came the reply, but controlled. They are dumping at intervals. Timed. A new counter appeared, uninvited. Human ships cycling heat every 20 seconds, synchronized across all 67 hulls. Not panic, not reaction. Procedure. Another punchline cut clean. They planned for this. Around Earth, civilian traffic continued to stream through the evacuation arcs. 20 million heat signatures now clear of gravity wells, moving unchallenged. The humans had not slowed their exodus. They had not broken formation. They had not returned fire. They were enduring. Admiral, the legalist said, voice tight, Council doctrine does not account for this level of kinetic tolerance. Threxil did not look away from the display. 67 ships, still 67, escalate, he said. Authorize continuous fire, collapse them by attrition. But sir, an aide began, then stopped. What? Threxil snapped. Our projections show sustained fire will deplete our forward capacitors in 11 minutes. Threxil froze. 11 minutes to exhaust a fleet of 10,000. Across the void, the human formation adjusted by a fraction of a degree. Engines flared, not evasive but preparatory. Vectors aligned inward, toward the Council shell. They had finished proving a point. The fire did not work, and now they were moving. Distance failed first. The human fleet did not scatter or charge. Blindly. It rotated as one, 67 hulls pivoting with mechanical precision. Engine bells flared white, then blue, then vanished into disciplined glare. No warning spike, no gradual build. Acceleration arrived as a fact. Vector change detected, a navigation officer called. Inward burn, all human ships, Threxil's. Display populated with new trajectories. At first glance, they were impossible. The intercept lines bent too sharply, converging on the Council's outer shell in minutes, not hours. Estimate time to contact, Threxil said. The answer came after a pause long enough to matter. 2 minutes. 40 seconds. A murmur crossed the bridge. Council doctrine assumed distance as armor. Engagements were fought at scale, attrition measured in days. No compliant species closed range under fire. None could survive the acceleration required. Sensors updated again. Sustained acceleration. 12 degree, the officer said. Correction. Rising. 15. The human ships did not decelerate. They corrected mid-burn, shaving angles with violent precision. Crew survivability models flickered red, then were dismissed. The models were not built for this. Punchline clarity struck. They are using themselves as the limit. Council formations began, to warp under the sudden compression of time. Layers designed for gradual engagement now faced imminent contact. Command ships issued conflicting orders. Hold position, widen arcs, concentrate fire. Beams slewed, missing optimal solutions by fractions that now mattered. Bring inner rings forward, Threxil ordered. Collapse the shell, too late. The humans crossed the midpoint of the system in 90 seconds. At that velocity, targeting windows shrank to breaths. Energy fire lanced again, less coordinated now, striking at angles never intended. Impacts still. failed to bite. Armor held. Shields flared and recovered. The battle space folded. Human ships threaded through the outer council formations, not dodging so much as ignoring them. Vector control was ruthless. Micro-burns adjusted orientation between heartbeats. Reaction mass vented in controlled bursts, carving corridors through overlapping firing arcs. A new data layer lit the display. Relative velocity at pass. 0.2 C. Close enough for proximity alarms to scream across council bridges. Close enough for debris from missed shots to become weapons. Collision risk, an aide warned. From them, Threxil asked. No, the aide said. From us. 2 council cruisers clipped each other, attempting emergency realignment. Hulls tore, atmospheres vented, no human fire involved. Another standalone line landed, cold and exact. Formation is a liability. Inside the human formation, nothing broke. They passed through, then began to turn. Impossibly tight arcs that defied inertia tables. Engines flared again, sustained at 18G for 3 full seconds. Threxil watched the math collapse. Engagement ranges recalculated downward. Defensive layers meant to be sequential were now simultaneous. The Council's advantage, scale, became congestion. Admiral, the sensor officer said, voice thin. Human ships are designating targets. Designations. Bloomed across the display, each tagged with timestamps measured in seconds. Not all targets, specific ones. Command nodes, fire control hubs, logistics cores, they were choosing. The human fleet completed its turn and stabilized, now inside the Council's effective envelope. For the first time, Threxil saw weapon ports opening along their hulls. Long, armored seams retracting to reveal mass drivers aligned with the heart of the formation. No flourish, no warning. Just readiness. Distance had been the Council's shield. For centuries. It was gone. The humans had arrived. The first human shot was not dramatic, it was punctual, a timer hit 0, and the human fleet fired as one. No flares, no charging glow. Mass drivers along their hulls discharged with contained violence, railgun slugs accelerating to 0.3 C before Council sensors finished registering launch. Projectile weapons detected, an aide snapped, too late for disbelief. Count. Multiple. Vectors. The first command ship ceased to exist. A slug punched through its forward shield, through the bridge spine, and out the aft hull in less than a millisecond. Internal compartments flash-ionized. The ship's mass folded inward as structural cohesion failed. There was no explosion worth naming, just absence where authority had been. 1 second later, the second flagship vanished. 2 seconds after that, the third. 3 command vessels erased in 90 seconds. A standalone line cut through the bridge. Command is not symbolic. Threxil stared as the tactical display shed icons faster than it could replace them. Council doctrine relied on layered command, distributed, resilient, slow to panic. The humans did not attack layers. They removed keystones. Missile bays opened next. Hundreds of human missiles spilled into the battle space, each one small, dense, and unapologetically physical. They did not rush forward in a wave. They coasted, cold, masking signatures until mid-course. Burns lit them into lethal geometry. "Missile count?" Threxil demanded. 812, came the reply. "Correction, 900. They split. Submunitions fanned outward, each assigned a discrete target. Fire control hubs. Sensor spines, reactor bulges, no redundancy strikes, no wasted mass. Council point defenses activated en masse. Energy screens flared, catching dozens of incoming bodies. It did not matter, the humans had done the math. At relative velocities this high, debris was enough. Fragments punched through secondary hulls. Shrapnel cascaded through exposed systems. One disabled ship drifted into another, then another. A chain reaction of inertia and poor spacing did what weapons had not. Casualty counters began climbing. 10 ships gone. 20. 37. Threxel felt something unfamiliar tighten in his thorax. Not fear. Compression. The sense of time being stolen. Return fire, he said, though it was already happening. Beams crisscrossed the void, frantic now, saturating space the humans had occupied seconds earlier. The human ships were no longer there. They moved by schedule. Another timer hit 0. From the rear of the human formation, 3 missiles detached, larger than the rest, slower, unmistakable. Council sensors screamed as yield estimates populated. Nuclear signatures, an aide whispered. Limited yield, directional. The detonations were precise, not system-killing, not even fleet-ending. They bloomed inside tightly packed council. Reserves, radiation cones, shaped to overload shields and blind sensors without sterilizing space. Ships caught at the edges went dark. Systems fused, crews alive but helpless. Mercy applied with a ruler. Punchline clarity followed. They choose how much you lose. Within 4 minutes, the Council's central coordination collapsed. Orders lagged, by seconds that no longer existed. Independent captains fought bravely, correctly, and uselessly. The humans were not fighting ships anymore. They were collapsing functions. A logistics tender detonated under railgun fire, its fuel cascade wiping out 5 escorts. A sensor array went silent, followed by the local defense grid that depended on it. Every loss compounded the next. "Admiral," the legalist said, voice strained. "This exceeds suppression parameters." Threxel did not answer. He watched numbers scroll. Council vessels destroyed. 312. Disabled, 614. Human losses, 0. Time elapsed. Since first kinetic fire, 6 minutes, 14 seconds. The human fleet did not advance further. It did not press the advantage indiscriminately. Fire came in intervals, bursts measured, pauses deliberate. During those pauses, evacuation traffic continued to stream past, untouched. They were fighting and holding back simultaneously. Threxel finally understood the shape of the trap. This was not extermination, it was demonstration. Every erased ship was a data point, every spared one a message. Another command node blinked out, then another. The Council fleet still outnumbered the humans. By orders of magnitude, it no longer mattered. Without coordination, scale became noise. The arithmetic was complete. What remained was cleanup, and the humans had not yet finished counting. The firing stopped on a clean second. Across the battle space, human weapons went silent in unison. Railguns powered down. Missile telemetry froze mid-update. Even the hum of engines softened as thrust tapered to station-keeping burns. The pause was so abrupt it registered as a sensor fault across Council ships. Threxel felt it as pressure lifting, and immediately replaced by something worse. A system-wide broadcast engaged. Not a narrow-beam demand, not a victory proclamation. An open transmission, wide enough to be heard by every ship, every relay, every observing polity leaning in from neighboring sectors. This is a declaration of law. The human voice was not the one from before. Older, measured, unhurried. It spoke as if time had been secured. Hostilities are suspended at this mark, the voice continued. A timestamp anchored itself to every display. 00.06.41 since first kinetic fire. Any vessel ceasing fire now will be protected. Council gunners hesitated. Some continued firing out of reflex. Those shots went unanswered and missed, the humans already out of their firing solutions. The voice went on. We recognize surrender at the ship, squadron, or fleet level. Power down weapons. Broadcast intent. You will not be destroyed for compliance. A ripple passed through the Council formation as isolated captains processed the words. Compliance doctrine had never included this phase. Surrender was something extracted, not offered. Another line followed, colder. Slavery statutes are non-negotiable. The broadcast shifted. Data packets unfurled alongside the words. Human legal frameworks translated into Council standard code. Prohibitions against forced labor, against population processing, against extermination as policy. Violations categorized. Penalties defined. Threxil watched in disbelief as some of his own legal officers leaned forward, reading. "You will be detained," the voice said, "not erased. You will be tried, not punished by annihilation. Command authority will be held individually accountable." A standalone line landed with surgical weight. "We do not kill prisoners." The battle space remained still. Human ships held their positions, weapons visibly cold. Evacuation counters ticked upward. 20,000 civilians clear and climbing. The humans had paused their victory to finish protecting their people. "This is not mercy for weakness," the voice said. "This is restraint by choice." Threxil felt the shape of defeat change, not collapse, not rout, something structural, the kind that rewrote assumptions. A council destroyer powered down its batteries, then another. Transponders shifted codes, surrender beacons lighting one by one. Not all complied. Some fired again, desperate or proud. Those ships vanished in single, precise responses. No escalation, no pursuit. Law enforced. The broadcast continued, now addressing observers beyond. The system. Let this be recorded. We will not expand this war if compliance is met. We will not accept authority built on processing sentient life. Silence followed. Not emptiness, but attention. Threxil stared at the timestamp still frozen on his display. The humans had stopped at 6 minutes and 41 seconds. They could have finished it. Everyone on the bridge knew it now. Instead, they had chosen to speak. A final line closed the declaration. "Stand down, and you will live to answer for what you did." The transmission ended. Weapons remained cold. The humans waited. The war had changed its shape, and the galaxy had been put on notice. The realization did not come from the Council. It came from the observers. Across distant relays and neutral platforms, coalition analysts replayed the battle with professional detachment. They stripped away panic, filtered propaganda, and let the numbers speak. What emerged was not a story of improvisation or luck or a species punching above its weight. It was familiarity. "These ships weren't adapted," said one analyst on a Thal relay, voice low with disbelief. "They were built this way." Frames froze on human hull schematics recovered from sensor ghosts. Armor layers were not retrofits. They were foundational, thick, load-bearing, integrated into power distribution and heat management from keel to spine. Mass sinks were not emergency measures but permanent organs. Every design choice traded elegance for survivability. Energy absorption profiles suggest expectation, not reaction, another observer added. They assumed they would be hit first, repeatedly. Doctrine analysis followed. Human formations did not maximize firepower per ship. They maximized persistence per crew, redundancy upon redundancy. Manual overrides for systems no modern fleet trusted humans to still operate by hand. Damage control teams drilled into hull sections that, by alien standards, should not have been occupied at all. Someone pulled archived human training footage from a century earlier. Crews running combat drills in sealed compartments, simulating loss of gravity, loss of command, loss of life support. The scenarios escalated past what the Council had just deployed. "Look at this," the analyst said. "Their failure cases assume extermination-level opposition." Silence followed. Crew psychology metrics painted the same picture. Heart rates during peak acceleration spiked, then stabilized. No panic cascades, no command hesitation. Humans had not reacted to impossible G-forces as emergencies. They had treated them as operating conditions. A coalition historian finally spoke, voice careful. "There are gaps in our records, entire regions where early civilizations vanished without trace. We catalogued them as natural disasters, stellar anomalies." The battle replay shifted, overlaying human vectors atop those ancient maps. "They match," the historian said. "Human expansion routes skirt those regions. Their early colonies are fortified far beyond necessity. Their myths—" He hesitated. "Their myths describe enemies that erase worlds, not conquer them." Another punchline landed, quiet and devastating. This was not their first warning. The observers saw it now in the humans' restraint. They did not chase fleeing ships. They did not sterilize space. Their weapons scaled cleanly downward as soon as surrender appeared. That was not moral discovery in the moment. That was doctrine refined by survival. They fight like a species that expects to be alone at the end, someone said. Across the system, human ships held position, unchanged since the declaration of war. Crews rotated watches, damaged teams patched superficial scars, no victory celebrations. No signals of triumph. Preparedness did not need applause. A final data packet circulated among coalition channels, unofficial but impossible to ignore. It contained comparative models. How long the Council fleet would have lasted if humans had removed all restraints. The answer was measured in minutes, not hours. The observers closed their analysis with a consensus note, terse and unanimous. Humanity did not rise to meet the galaxy's violence. They had been waiting for it, and whatever had taught them to wait was still out there. The humans resumed. Time. At 00:12 Suron, exactly 5 minutes after the declaration of law, the fleet moved again, not forward, but outward. 67 ships spread into pre-computed arcs, spacing themselves with mathematical indifference to the chaos around them. This phase is containment, the human broadcast announced, narrowcast now, addressed only to active combatants. Schedules are attached. Schedules. Council systems ingested the data involuntarily. Timelines populated displays. Strike windows, surrender grace periods, boarding sequences. Every remaining Council vessel was tagged with a clock. Non-compliant ships will be disabled, the voice continued. Disabled ships will be boarded. Boarding will proceed without lethal force unless resisted. The first strikes were surgical. Railguns fired in short bursts, targeting propulsion nodes and power trunks instead of hull centers. Slugs punched clean holes, venting thrust and spinning ships into helpless drifts. No explosions. No cascading loss of life. Disabled count climbed. Ships in the first minute. By the second, human assault craft launched next. Compact, armored, brutally utilitarian. They did not dogfight. They flew straight lines at controlled speeds, timing arrivals to the exact second shields dropped or power died. Boarding teams breached with cutting charges, calibrated to avoid decompression. Human Marines flowed through corridors in pairs, weapons shouldered but rarely fired. Stun rounds, restraints, sealant foam for hull breaches they did not cause. A standalone line echoed through multiple channels. Compliance saves lives. Council. Resistance fractured along predictable lines. Squadrons with intact command corps attempted coordinated fire. They were answered by synchronized missile strikes, 8 missiles per target, spaced at 0.4-second intervals to defeat point defense. Timing. The math was merciless. Squadrons dissolved, independent captains faced their clocks alone. Some powered down immediately, broadcasting surrender codes. Others waited until the last seconds, hoping the humans would miss their own schedule. They did not. At T-0, weapons fired. At T+3, boarding began. Numbers accumulated with relentless clarity. Council ships destroyed, 6-111, disabled, 1-842, boarded, 1-309, human casualties, 7 injured, 0 killed. Evacuation counters ticked past 24,000 civilians clear. The battle space grew quieter by the minute. Not because of exhaustion, but because systems were being removed faster than courage could replace them. Ships without engines drifted into surrender lanes. Crews laid down arms in corridors already lit by human helmet lamps. Some council officers attempted self-destruction. Human interceptors neutralized reactors with precision shots, preserving ships and crews alike. Suicide was treated as resistance. Resistance was stopped. Mercy did not mean permissiveness. A second punchline cut through the data flood. You will survive to answer. By the 20-minute mark, only organized resistance remained near the inner ring. Veteran units, elite by council. Standards, refusing surrender on principle. They tightened formations, overlapping fields of fire, preparing for annihilation. The humans adjusted. 3 ships broke off, accelerating to Tendri, flanking wide. Missile volleys followed, not to destroy, but to herd. The council formation compressed involuntarily, forced into a denser cluster. Then came the final strikes. Directional nuclear detonations bloomed at calculated distances, radiation cones sculpted to overload shields and sensors without killing crews. Ships went blind. Power grids fused. Life support held. Silence followed. Boarding clocks started. Within 8 minutes, the last organized resistance powered down. At 00:41, since first kinetic fire, the system was secure. Human ships returned to holding patterns. Assault craft docked. Boarding teams reported counts, not trophies. Prisoners were processed, catalogued, and transferred to secured compartments with medical oversight. No pursuit followed fleeing debris. No victory laps traced the void, the EA. Humans had reached their scheduled endpoint and stopped. A final broadcast went out, calm as a ledger closing. Combat operations complete. Surrender protections remain in effect. Any hostile action beyond this mark will be treated as individual. Violation of law. The counters froze. Council authority had not been shattered in a single blow. It had been dismantled by timetable, each piece removed when its moment arrived. The humans held position, watching for deviations. None came. Dominance had been established, not by fury, but by adherence to plan. And the galaxy learned something precise and unsettling. When humanity set a schedule, they kept it. Surrender did not look like defeat. It looked like order. Human ships established processing lanes through the wreckage, their movements slow now, deliberate. Disabled council vessels were stabilized first, hulls patched, power rerouted, life support reinforced. Medical craft moved freely among former enemies, docking without escort. Prisoners were catalogued by name, rank, and command authority. Not numbers. Names. Threxil stood under guard on the bridge he had once ruled, watching human personnel work with infuriating professionalism. They did not gloat. They did not hurry. Restraints were firm but careful, calibrated to physiology. An injured officer was treated before being questioned. A dead one was recorded, not discarded. "This is temporary detention," a human officer explained, voice neutral. "You will be transferred to a holding facility pending tribunal." "Tribunal," Threxil repeated. "Yes," the officer said. "Individual responsibility, evidence-based review. You will be allowed counsel." A standalone line settled like weight. Authority does not absolve crimes. Across the system, surrender beacons multiplied. Council captains transmitted compliance. Codes not out of fear, but calculation. The humans had demonstrated something more dangerous than power, predictability. Those who surrendered were alive. Those who resisted were stopped. No exceptions. No improvisation, external channels erupted. Member systems of the Council, watching from light hours away, began to speak openly for the first time in centuries. They replayed the Declaration of Law. They passed the statutes, anti-slavery clauses, protections for non-combatants, trials instead of erasure. "This framework applies to us?" one envoy asked. The answer came quickly and publicly. "It applies to everyone," the human broadcast replied, "including us." That answer traveled faster than the battle had. Within hours, formal notices arrived. Trade blocks suspending council authority, border systems declaring neutrality under Earth's legal protections, coalition worlds requesting observer status in upcoming tribunals. The Council's power had always rested on inevitability, on the belief that resistance only delayed processing. That belief was gone. A second punchline moved through diplomatic channels like a shockwave. Compliance is no longer mandatory. Human legal teams deployed alongside Marines, securing data cores and command records. Every order given during the invasion was logged. Every chain of command preserved. This was not conquest. It was preparation. Threxil watched as a junior human clerk flagged his own signature on an authorization he barely remembered issuing. It had been routine. It had condemned millions. "There will be questions," the clerk said, not unkindly. "You'll have a chance to answer them." That was worse than execution. Outside the holding area, human ships escorted evacuation traffic homeward, then held position. No flags raised, no claims staked. Earth had not declared an empire. It had declared a standard, systems that had feared. Council reprisal for generations now had an alternative. Not rebellion, alignment. By the end of the day, 12 member worlds formally withdrew from Council jurisdiction. Another 9 requested provisional protection under human law. The Council's remaining leadership issued a statement invoking tradition, unity, and stability. It went unanswered. Threxil felt the shape of history tilt. Not violently, inevitably. The humans had not destroyed the Council, they had rendered it optional. As prisoners were transferred and ships secured, a final status update scrolled across every human display. Combat phase concluded. Legal phase ongoing. The inner war was over. What followed would last much longer. Peace settled the way dust does after impact, slow, revealing what remained broken. Human ships held their stations around Earth, no longer as shields, but as markers. Wreckage fields were mapped and cordoned. Boarding logs closed. Prisoner transfers completed. The system breathed again, cautiously. On the surface, cities emerged from shelters into intact skies. Evacuation tallies finalized at 27,113,092 civilians saved. Infrastructure losses were measured, repair schedules already circulating. For humanity, the battle was over. The work had begun. Then a sensor tech on a deep-range array paused. "Command," she said, voice level but tight. "We have an anomalous return. Extreme range." The contact was faint, barely above background noise, but precise. A narrowband. Emission, repeating at fixed intervals, drifting in from beyond the mapped edge of the outer rim. Not a ship signature, not a probe, a pattern. The data packet reached Earth's command center within seconds. Analysts cross-referenced automatically, pulling from archives that predated faster-than-light navigation. Records labeled obsolete. Disappearances written off as coincidence. The match resolved in silence. This signal, an analyst said carefully, appears in 7 historical incidents. Each coincides with a human colony that vanished before first contact with the wider galaxy. Timelines overlaid, the intervals aligned. The signal was older than the Council, older than most recorded civilizations. Its vector pointed inward, unhurried, accelerating at a constant 0.002 c. No deviation, no response to observation. Another standalone line appeared on the display. It has not changed course. Command staff absorbed the implication without drama. No alarm sounded, no orders barked. Humanity had learned long ago that panic wasted time. "Estimate arrival," a voice asked. 16 months, came the reply. Margin of error, negligible. Silence held. Then action resumed, not frantic, but methodical. Shipyards received updated specifications. Training schedules shifted. Data packets were released to coalition observers. Unredacted. The declaration of law expanded to include a new clause. Exterminator-class entities would be treated as existential threats to all sentient life. There would be no processing, no negotiation, only defense. On distant relays, alien observers connected. The final dots, the humans' armor, their doctrines, their refusal to escalate without reason. This was not arrogance or restraint learned late, it was memory. A memory of something that erased worlds and left only echoes. The signal pulsed again, steady as a metronome, ancient, patient. Human ships did not move to intercept. Not yet. They continued repairs, continued trials, continued rebuilding Earth. Preparation was not visible from the outside. It never was. In the quiet after victory, humanity updated a single internal status line, one not broadcast to the galaxy. First contact protocols concluded, prior war conditions confirmed. When the signal finally arrived, it would not find a fractured planet or an unprepared species. This time the answer would already be waiting.